Former Attorney General and Legal Affairs Minister Justice Charles Ramson has testified of the brutality and violation of civil rights during the 1970s and 80s under the Forbes-Burnham-led government. Justice Ramson recounted what he deemed as subliminal intimidatory acts and other injustices before the Walter Rodney Commission of Inquiry on day 10 of the 6th session of public hearings. The former Attorney General told commissioners that he was also a victim of police harassment for simply being an onlooker at a Working People's Alliance WPA meeting.
Could I now bring you to the case of Charles Rishiram Ramson against Lloyd Barker, Commissioner of Police and Attorney General? That name is a reference to you, yes. Justice Ramson.
That was inspired by a beating I got in Sheriff Street when I went to, in my usual afternoon jaunts. I went to listen to a meeting that was scheduled by the WPA. And
can you remember the date?
I think it was 22nd of August, 1979. That is in my statement.
Yes, it is. That date is referred to in your statement.
That something else happened in 95, but I think that was the 26th of August. It had nothing to do with this. So sometimes I mix up the dates.
Yes, the date you refer to is referred to in the statement is the 22nd of August, 1979.
Correct.
And you have just told us that you were hoping to attend the WPA meeting in, I believe, in Sheriff Street. Can you
Correct.
tell us what happened after that?
Well, at about 6:30, myself, along with the current Chief Justice acting, who was one of my squaddies at St. Stanislaus, before he became
This would be Mr. Justice Ian Chang?
Correct. He didn't have a car at the time, so he wanted a lift home from the DPP's place. And I offered to drop him home. But we wanted to go and see this, have a look and see what is going on at this meeting, because the political temperature was rising, the thermostat was bursting at the seams. So we wanted to see what was going on. Not to be participants. That's why we stood so far away, about 500 yards from the meeting. And if you know Mr. Chang, Justice Chang is not a man who likes to be involved at the political level. So while we were there, we noticed a squad of policemen, or people who were dressed in police clothes. In those days, we used to call them the riot squad. I don't know if it's the same thing like the TSU now. But the riot squad had a particular set of clothes that you know when they come in. And they were big, honky, 5'7", 6 foot, and 6'4" people. Their mere presence used to frighten me.
It used to make you afraid as well, Justice Ramson?
What happened to me?
I see.
I don't look like 6'4". I may have a very strong mind and personality, and I don't believe I can ever be described as a coward. But I can tell you, I was no match physically for those. I would know. Some of them said they weren't policemen. That's evidence in the case. The defense in the case was that these people were thugs from the House of Israel.
He said action was initiated in the High Court but was subsequently dismissed on the grounds that the officials, like himself, should not be involved in such political activities. Justice Ramson believed that this was a clear violation of personal liberty. Painting a picture of what obtained under the Burnham regime, he recounted one instance where one Gordon Todd was flown over the Atlantic Ocean and threatened by President Burnham for instigating a protest. Once again, evidence of the People's National Congress, PNC regime's control over the press was brought to light. He told commissioners that the 1978-1980 period was one of peril, with numerous food items banned and charges instituted on citizens for having certain items. Justice Ramsden also testified of judicial interference by the powers at that time.
During that period, in terms of whether they were independent?
There were some independent magistrates. The then chief magistrate, Mr. Alexander, was a very independent-minded man. He had to run to Trinidad because they refused to give him a judgeship when he was entitled. It was part of the process by which you become a judge. And he had to leave.
Counsel, I would be concerned to know more about this interference. I mean, what form, some judges resisted, some did not. What form this interference took?
Well, I can give you a concrete example.
I would expect you to speak within your own knowledge and not...
Yes, well, I did a case many years ago, a very important constitutional case. And the judge at the time was a puny judge by the name of, who eventually became the chancellor, a very erudite man, A.F.R. Bishop, Aubrey Fitzgerald or Fitzronald. Bishop, and he, during the late 1970s, there was something called a referendum or something like that. 1978, as a precursor for the introduction of the 1980 Constitution, where there was a constituent assembly and they rewrote the whole Constitution to suit them what is said to be the consensus. The same Constitution is now in substantially the same form today. So there was a man called, a very eminent dentist, used to be in Brickdam, called Richmond, Makepeace Richmond, but he also dabbled in politics. He was the leader of some party, he and Gunraj Kumar. I think it was a Liberator Party or some kind of, you know, these people call it's really a misnomer. They are trying to liberate themselves and they want to call the party Liberator Party. It's really a misnomer. It's now dead and gone. And he wanted to publish in the newspapers, the same national newspapers we have, GNNL.
The Guyana Chronicle newspaper?
Well, I think it was the Chronicle at the time, but the GNNL is the company. And so the name of the case would be in GNNL, and would make Peace Richmond against GNNL. And they wouldn't take his advertisement. Another lawyer gave evidence to support it. His name is Lalta Ramgopal.
What type of advertisement was it?
It was something to do with the meetings he was going to have.
Political meetings?
Political meetings.
I see.
And he couldn't, no matter what he did, he couldn't get them to publish this notice. But they were publishing the notices either by way of official publications or notices sent out by the PNC. So he decided to consult his lawyers, and it happened that Mr. Chase and I were his lawyers. And we took them to court. And it took a long time for the case to be brought up, first and foremost. And eventually, Justice Bishop recorded in his judgment. And he had to, in his judgment, you will see that he refers to having to reconstruct all the arguments and the evidence in the case, because the day before he had issued, that he was scheduled to give this decision, he had put aside, as he was a very meticulous fellow, he put aside in 3 separate bundles. The evidence is recorded in the judgment. The West Indian reports, I think it is, or the Guyana law reports. And 3 bundles, like something like this. He had it locked up in his chambers, ready to deliver his judgment. He had written 150-something pages in his judgment, in his own handwriting. And when he went to court the next morning to deliver his judgment, we were all there, we asked him what happened. He said they thief out all the papers.
He said what?
They stole the papers. It's our local way of saying. He said they stole, when he was surprised, he looked, he said, but he tried, he said he wondered whether he took those papers home. He went to home, he couldn't come back, and he came back and he said, he told us he will have to reconstruct this thing, but he's going to give the judgment. And he wrote the judgment. And he said so in his, what I'm telling you now, he actually wrote in the judgment.
For the first time, evidence of a special squad under the management of former Commissioner of Police Laurie Lewis, the National Guard Service, was brought before the Commission. He said the service was instituted under the guise of ensuring that all government ministries and departments are secured.
Right where the GRA is now, there used to be a building there. And around that time, they had formed a special squad under the directorship or leadership of a famous man called Laurie Lewis. At that time, he was the senior superintendent of police. And he had his sidekick, a man called Sultan Qasim, who was a deputy superintendent or something at the time. The outfit, and he had another man with him, who is the uncle of a famous politician now. His name is Ram Jatan, Uncle Ram. So the 3 of them were the people in charge of this outfit. It used to be called the National Guard Service. It's no longer in place, but they were supposed.
They were an official governmental.
Yes. You can't have 3 police officers in charge of an outfit and not be official. These are senior police officers. One became the most famous police commissioner we ever had, Laurie Lewis.
What was the ostensible official purpose for the National Guard Service? You able to tell us?
Yeah, it was officially, according to my information, to ensure that all government offices and government ministers or government departments are secure, and significantly, but ironically, their headquarters were next door to the same place at Borno.
No, but they came into being after that burning down, or
No. Around about a year before.
I see.
And they were stationed right next door. It then became before they moved in, it was called Blue Note. Now it's some fool's place, some kind of fool. That is 2 buildings from Middle Street corner in Camp Street. I used to go and meet them there. Because although I was one of those who they used to be watching, Laurie Lewis and I used to play cricket since the 60s.
Justice Ramsden told the commissioners the straw that broke the camel's back was when Dr. Rodney attended the Pan-African Conference along with the former president, Forbes Burnham. He said this angered Burnham. The former Attorney General recalled that after hearing the news of Rodney's killing, he and other associates who were at a hangout spot fled to their homes for security reasons. Attorney Selwyn Peters, who represents the interest of the Guyana Trades Union Congress, sought to suggest that Justice Ramsden was misrepresenting the appearance of police officers at a time.
I'm concerned about where police officers were hired and where they were trained. So you just answered the questions that I asked you and nothing else.
Yeah, well, I can't train them.
Let me ask you this. you would know that the Guyana Police Force, as any other police organization, at least until, let's say, the 80s, they had a height requirement, for example, for people who want to be members of their organizations.
Well, that was a requirement, and it was always the case that you need to be of a certain height before you were able to qualify to be admitted as a policeman.
So it would be that any member of the Guyana Police Force would have been over 5 feet 11.
I don't think 5 feet 11, I think about 5'6".
I'm telling you what the height requirement was, 5'11" and
If
over.
that is what is record, I would accept that.
And so you would have seen, when you saw people, and they were around 6 feet tall or over, that would have been consistent with the hiring practice at the time, across the board.
I am speaking about 6'4".
And how many people that you say would have been 6'4", that would have been in the Tactical Services Unit on August 22nd, 1979?
The people who I saw on that day, none of them was less than 6'2", 6'3".
I'm sorry to interrupt your flow, Council, but could you tell me the source of the height recommendation that you just put forward?
Being the
The
standard.
height requirement, Council. You said it's 5 foot 11, 5 feet 11?
5 feet 11.
Where is the source of that?
It's in the Guyana Police Force recruitment material. I'll have it laid over
It's
to
in
the
the Ghana
commission.
Police Force, what?
Recruitment material, I'll have it
Thank you.
laid over to the commission.
Council, I'm concerned about relevance, though. Is that likely to be helpful?
Sorry, I missed what you just said, Mr. Chairman.
No. I was saying that I was beginning to get concerned about relevance. How is it likely to be helpful to us?
How is what relevant or helpful to
I'm talking
you?
about the questions that you're posing and the evidence that you're trying to extract.
The witness has been cross-examined on evidence that he gave this morning. He gave that evidence and he's been cross-examined. But let me ask you this, going to the meat of
I think you're
relevance.
saying they're not as menacing as he made them out to be, or they weren't a special squad of menacers.
Well, yes, he tried to sort of have a stereotypical image of what tactical services unit officers would look like.
I thought he was referring to conduct rather than appearance.
No, he was referring to appearance. You look at the transcripts. I was here and I heard that he tried to stereotype
Well, I
those
didn't know you had
officers in a way that's
transcripts.
inappropriate.
Otherwise, I would have asked you to move on ever since, because you were going back over testimony that was given and not, I don't think, were issues of dispute earlier this morning. What time he joined the service and how many years he worked in the Attorney General's department and that sort of thing. And he'll get ahead.
No, well, that is background.
I know you only physically came here at the break time and that you were traveling.
No,
last night
no,
this
Mr. Chairman, I got all it. There were some details that I filled in which were relevant for any witnesses. We can ask them when they became an attorney, but I don't want to debate that. I'm just going to move on. From your decision, both of them actually, you would agree that in 1979, where police officers act without reasonable and probable grounds, recklessly or in breach of constitutional rights, Guyanese citizens had resort to the court for remedial measures.
I think your question, for me to assimilate everything you've put together in one mouthful, I would need you to let me know in shorter sentences what your really getting at, because you will agree that that's quite a mouthful.
Well, let's take them piecemeal then, no problem. You'd agree with me, and of course, there's no dispute having regard to your decision in the 33 WIR case, that where there's a breach of a citizen's constitutional right, that citizen can have resort to the court for a remedy.
Correct. Correct.
You would also agree that where there's a tort or a trespass, assault being an example, and that's in 1979, a citizen had resort to the court for remedial measures.
Correct.
You'd also agree that, and your case in the 33 WIR sets that out, when the police act outside of the scope of their duties, a citizen had resort to the courts as well.
Correct. That is why I went. I was an ordinary citizen. But how many of us were brave enough? What happened to Moses Bhagwan? He got a broken arm.
And in that case, he would have had access to the courts in the same manner as you did.
That's if he had a broken arm. I suspect he didn't have a broken arm. He didn't have a broken arm. Putting plaster around your hand don't mean you got a broken arm. I know Moses. Moses is a political animal.
I think perhaps though your first answer is perhaps more acceptable, which is that how many of us were brave enough? Because some people may decide for one reason or another to proceed.
And some of them don't have enough money. Some of them don't. In fact, I was told by a current Chief Justice, who was a Guyanese lawyer at the time practicing here, how I could carry the matter so far for $1. Now he's the Chief Justice in another country. I want to know what he would think. I ain't calling his name. But that was the attitude of the text. Why are you worried to go to the court?
His name is well known.
Exactly.
His name is well known.
Very well, and he was brilliant. He was a Guyana scholar.
So when you said the attitude at the time was why you bothered to go to the court, how was this reflected? Why do you say this was the attitude?
There were many people who were aggrieved, but they either were disillusioned with the judicial system, or they weren't happy having to be drawn through the courts. They didn't want to be the object of surveillance. And
Peters also accused Justice Ramsden of stereotyping. During cross-examination by attorney Christopher Ram, who represents the WPA, the former Attorney General said he was targeted because he had broken rank with a party his father supported. He was asked if his courage had taken flight after Rodney's assassination. Justice Ramsden told Attorney Ram that it would have been foolhardy not to take precautionary measures given the atmosphere at that time.
You spoke admirably this morning of your courage. Yet on page 6, referring to the moments after 9 o'clock on 13th of June 1980, you state, out of fear for what may be the consequences, we repaired to our respective homes within the neighborhood. Did that courage take flight?
I would tell you, there's a fine distinction between courage and asinine behavior. If you see a man running here with a AK-47, I ain't gonna stand up here and watch the man. I duck and hide and eat it. Because bullet don't have name.
You said, okay, out of fear for what may be the consequences. What consequences are you referring to here?
I explained this morning, the GPDL, sometimes they're centrally directed to take off the switch for that particular area where known people are. You must, there's a man called Daniels and Lincoln Lewis.
George Daniels.
George Daniels was the head of PSU, and Lincoln Lewis was part of this
Bauxite.
anti-government operations. and they were at a meeting in which I attended at the ground, the national park or something, and they pulled off, the switch, and Lincoln was found under the stage.
Doing what, hiding?
Hiding. I only tell you what I experienced.
He said attempts were made upon the request by late President Dr. Chetty Jagan for him while he was Attorney General to bring back murder-accused Sergeant Gregory Smith to trial.
The information we had and the communication between the foreign ministries, because these things come through a circle, is that they were, one of the impediments was that same letter. And we wanted to, Dr. Jagan wanted to give them the assurance. His Excellency was very firm about it because being the kind of Democrat he was, he wanted to ensure that there was justice done in the situation. And I think words to that effect were in the same drafted letter.
I was surprised that in the face of, would be surprised that in the face of vigorous pursuit of demand that it would have taken 16 years to raise that.
The PNC wouldn't have done it. We only got into power in 92. That is why in 1988 that so-called inquest took place. It's a matter of that nature should have been done by the Chief Magistrate, the inquest, and should have been done properly. That three-man jury should never have been manned. He shouldn't even be on it, and he was the foreman, Pony Limpy.
You call him a thug, huh?
If he's a thug.
Did you say a three-man jury?
Yes, it's a three-man jury. It was done in Court 6. I used to visit the place then. Court 6 in Mirage Building.
But is the jury not normally regulated, the size of the jury by law?
It's 3, I think it's 3 in the
It was as low as 3.
for an inquest, you need only 3.
So that there was nothing irregular about 3 men.
No. Nothing
You
irregular.
were really
About that.
criticizing the men.
The PNC always gave a semblance of regularity to anything it did. Mr. Barnum is no fool, I'm telling you that.
You mentioned a moment ago the correspondence and you did not use the word cooperation between the authorities in French Guiana and the PPP administration. And you said that you were confident that Mr. Gregory Smith was in French Guiana.
That I came to that conclusion because the request of the French Guiana government at the time was that they have to be given an assurance from the president that the man would not be executed if returned and tried.
Assistant Lead Counsel to the Commission, Lashmir Ahmed, summed up the day's proceedings.
What is clear is that the AG at the time, Mr. Ramson, indicated that he personally wrote a letter, having been given the instructions by the then President Dr. Jagan, giving the French authorities the assurance that if Gregory Smith was brought back and faced trial in relation to the offense, he would not be given the death penalty. It means that the government of Guyana were actively involved and participating in negotiations with the French authorities to have Gregory Smith return. Their major concern, as indicated by Justice Ramson, was that if they did send him back, they were members of a treaty where they were opposed to the death penalty. They would not have sent him back to Guyana knowing fully well that if he was convicted, he would be given the death penalty. And that is the reason why it was necessary to offer them some sort of assurance that even if he's tried and convicted, the death penalty would not be enforced. Even though that letter was sent according to Justice Ramson, for whatever reason, the negotiations in relation to the extradition in 1996 did not work out. And as we all know, Gregory Smith was not extradited to Guyana to answer to those charges.